It's time for Get the Lax Scoop, a podcast bringing you all the people and stuff you should know in the game of lacrosse. We take lax seriously, but ourselves, not so much. Join hosts Big Dog and Jaybird and the biggest names in the game. Brought to you by J. McMahon Lacrosse. That's JML, skills, mindset, and lax IQ training.
Ron Douglas, the Big Dog, was a collegiate football and lacrosse player at Brown. He was also an assistant lacrosse coach and the executive director of the Sports Foundation.
And Jay McMahon, the Jaybird, a three-time All-American midfielder at Brown. He was a captain of the U.S. Junior National Team and is the founder of JML. And joining us in the studio, Steve Grisolfi, whose collegiate lacrosse career statistics equals 1 goal against Dartmouth. All right, so Jaybird, this is going to be one of those episodes where we're going to need to buckle our seatbelts and hang on here.
Strapping myself in right now.
Well, you better, Jay, because, you know, I like to think that I can outsize and out-volume about anyone in the game today, but I have met my match today. We got two guys who I think in size, energy, and volume can match me and then some. So this is going to be fun, Jay.
Absolutely. This is certainly going to be a super high energy episode, Big Dog.
Now, Jaybird, let's get this thing going. Our first guest, he's simply a world-class player and coach. 3-time All-American, Jay, and a 2-time first-teamer. Played his collegiate lacrosse at Brown University. A native of New Canaan, Connecticut. Not exactly what was known as a hotbed of lacrosse until he came along. He graduated from Brown as the all-time leading scorer with 150 goals, which I know really annoys our other guest. A record he held for more than 20 years, he did, until that Dylan Malloy guy came along. He helped lead the Bears to an Ivy title in 91, to 3 NCAA tournament appearances, and he was the Ivy Player of the Year in 1993. You know, this guy was recognized as simply one of the top players in the country for almost a decade because he made the U19 US National Team in 1988, and he was invited to 2 U.S. World Team tryouts in 93 and 97. He played professionally, both indoors and in the field game for 5 years, earning Major League Lacrosse All-Star honors in 2002, a year in which he also led the league in face-off win percentage. And I can say absolutely, he's just a great teacher and motivator. He coached extensively in college. He was an assistant at Brown, Yale, Fairfield, and Dartmouth. Spent a year as the head coach at the University of Hartford, and then 5 years at the helm of the Dartmouth men's lacrosse program. In recent years, he's become one of the most sought after and highly regarded individual lacrosse skills trainers out there, while also serving as the head coach of the Chaos Lacrosse Club of the Professional Lacrosse League. And of course, he led the Chaos to the 2021 PLL championship.
Yeah, baby.
We are excited to welcome the founder of Lacrosse Draws, a skill development college recruiting lacrosse program. Ladies and gentlemen, number 44, Andy Towers. Welcome to Get the Lax Scoop, Andy.
Wow.
Woo-hoo.
You made me blush, Ron. Appreciate that. That's one hell of a lead-in. That puts a lot of pressure on me.
Well, Andy, you know, it's all true. It's all true.
Well, I appreciate it for sure. And I look forward to being on the program, especially with you three and certainly with David. I'm looking forward to it. So let's go.
All right, Jay, let's get this thing going. Let's introduce
Absolutely,
our other
Ron.
guest.
Our next guest is another world-class player and coach. After playing his high school lacrosse at Loyola in Baltimore, he was also a 3-time All-American and also a rare 2-time first-teamer. The Ivy League Player of the Year in 1995 and the Rookie of the Year in 1993, he led the Bears to 2 Ivy championships and 2 NCAA tournaments, including Brown's 1994 run to the Final Four. More than 25 years after he graduated, he remains 3rd all-time at Brown in both career goals and points. He went on to play professionally for the Baltimore Thunder and the Boston Cannons of Major League Lacrosse, where he was a 6-time Major League All-Star. He won the league's fastest shot contest 3 years in a row and once held the record for the fastest shot in the world at 109 miles per hour. Scorching. When he retired, he was the Boston Cannons' all-time leading goal scorer with 133 goals. He's remained deeply involved in the game as a founder, coach, and the recruiting coordinator for the highly successful Lax Lacrosse Club in the Boston area. He has developed and guided countless players to successful college careers at all levels over his nearly 15 years with Lax. There are few people who are more connected and knowledgeable in the college lacrosse recruiting game. A tremendous teacher of the game who's passionate about everything he does. Give a big welcome to big number 16, David Evans.
Thanks, guys.
Woohoo.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to get together and, talk about the sport we love. Brought us all together, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Fantastic.
Jay, talk about coming in hot, 109 miles an hour.
That's coming in hot.
That's
Scorching.
about 30 miles an hour faster than Jay and I shot in the midnight. And that's
Just
real.
about. Right.
Maybe even Jay, you had a harder shot than I did, but 109. I mean, that's
Right.
almost like
Maybe-
bionics.
Maybe 20 miles an hour faster than mine. Yeah.
I don't want to, canoe backwards, but what a lot of people don't realize is that competition didn't start until 3 years into the league. And at that point, I'd already been out of college 8 years. And they're like, one all-star game, they just started, hey, we're going to do a fastest shot and most accurate. And of course, I was annoyed because they put me in the fastest shot contest, won that. And then I was like, well, I want to be in the most accurate too. And they're like, well, we got these guys. And they had this little, like the little ECI.
Cherry boys.
Yeah. Little things. And I'm like, and guys are shooting and they're missing. I'm like, bro, I tagged that at 100 every time.
Right. Do speed and accuracy together. Bring it.
I don't know.
Not to mention, you probably were at like 115 for the first 4
Right,
years before
right.
they did it.
Right.
Well-
He was getting at that, wasn't he, AT? I could tell.
Like pre MLL, like I'm down at Woodbury Forest coaching, high school program, soccer, lacrosse. I'm in sick shape. I'm probably tipping it at like 240,
Yeah.
Dang.
squatting in the house, benching. Guys are calling me to lift weights twice a day. The high school kids, like, hey, we need a proctor in the weight room. What's that?
I said, that was a great house. I visited you there.
Oh yeah, the outing
Very
cabin,
forest.
the outing cabin in the woods.
Cranking you two on the way out from the out. He was like out in the woods. That long
Yeah.
drive out there was sick.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Jay,
Cool.
as we anticipated, it's going to take a lot to control this interview. So,
It is.
Jay, I think
I'll jump into the first
why don't
question.
we turn things to you for the first question, Jay?
All right. Andy, let's begin with you.
Sure.
You hail the lacrosse hotbed of New Canaan, Connecticut. It's become a hotbed. And we know your dad, Tom Tower Sr., played at Manhasset
Yeah.
High School on Long Island. Now, is it true that he played with the legendary Jim Brown?
It's very true. Jim Brown
Wow.
was, I think, class of 57 out of Manhasset High School.
Wow.
And my dad was 59.
That's
So yes,
crazy.
yes, he did.
That's the
My
way
dad
he
tells
rolled.
endless stories ad
That's-
nauseum about
that's
Jim
a-
Brown.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
great. Now, did your dad introduce you and your brother Tom to the game? By the way, Tom,
did. He
Andy's
did.
brother
My
was
dad,
an All-American at
Coach
Brown, too.
Benedict, who was a legendary high school coach at New Canaan High School. They actually launched the New Canaan Youth Lacrosse Association. And I think it started with a couple of camps and ultimately it led to town youth leagues. And so I went to those first couple camps and I remember Eamon McEnany, Mike O'Neill came and were counselors at the camp. And it was
Wow.
really unbelievable. But yeah, he started the program. My class was the first class to go all the way through. We started in third grade. And so by the time we were ninth graders, we had played 6 years and we're one of two towns along with Wilton that actually had youth lacrosse in town. And obviously that gave us a huge advantage in high school. So we had to venture down to Long Island and play the big boys of Garden City to try to find some competition. Unfortunately, that didn't turn out so well that day.
What do you remember about that game?
But Steve
That was sick.
Luciano slipped every single time he had the ball in the first half. And I was just playing golf with Stiletto and a couple of his buddies down in Florida this past weekend. And Joe was reliving the story about how he snapped at Luciano at halftime for slipping every time he had the ball, because Luciano was awesome.
He was very
And
good.
Leader was covering him, and Luciano didn't do anything in that game, at least in the first half, until Stiletto bullied some freshmen into giving Luciano his cleats. And then he showed up in the second half a little bit better, but it still wasn't in time to beat you guys. But you guys, your team was unbelievable. I'm not sure that we would have beaten you even if we played our best, but it was a great game.
It was a great day. It was big game, probably one of the biggest games that we had played in high school for sure. So yeah, it was great. Good memory back in '87.
That's right.
That's amazing. You guys go that far back. And Dave, now I know you'd want people to know, You're not from Baltimore, Dave. You're from Dundalk.
Yeah, it's
And I know, I know talking to you through the years, like everybody thinks because you're from that area, right? There's just lacrosse everywhere. But, I know you didn't have kind of the same opportunities, I understand, in youth lacrosse that a lot of the kids had in Baltimore. So how'd you begin your sort of journey as a player, and who was important to you early on in your career? How did it all get started for you, Dave?
well, I mean, pretty similar. My dad, Skip, he was introduced to lacrosse by Bob Scott at Johns Hopkins. And Bob was like a relentless energy guy. He coached at Hopkins at the time. He was obviously the varsity lacrosse coach. They call it varsity because they had 3 teams at Hopkins at that time. And he would go out and promote the sport within the town. And he would always go and watch guys play. He'd hear about kids playing as they're growing up. And he went over to City College, which is where my father went to. That was City College was a pretty premier high school in Baltimore back in the day. It still is. It's just gone a little bit different direction, more revenue sport, less lacrosse. And it was also a place where guys from the county would come to the city. It wasn't too bad a commute at the time, public transportation, that kind of thing. And my father played football, and he watched him play a football game and said hi to him afterwards, and said, why don't you come to Hopkins game this weekend? We got a scrimmage against Navy, blah blah blah. And he was hooked ever since. And he brought it. He just became a little bit of a prodigal son to Bob, and he brought it to Dundalk. And over the years, it's kind of crazy now because you see guys like Phil Scaniak Jr. playing at Navy, and he was one of the early guys out of the Dundalk program that made it. And basically, it was like, it really is a throwback kind of story for, all the right moves. And, the Tom Cruise football movie, Steel Town, it's a steel town. Dundalk was a town built around Bethlehem Steel Sparrows Point plant, which at one point was the largest, distributor of steel in the world. And the guys would jump on the trolley car and ride down the middle of Dundalk Avenue to the steel mill. And, it was good. It was good when it was good. And you made a lot of money. You worked your ass off, but you came home covered in soot and coke. They have this thing called the coke ovens, where they'd make the molten steel, and it was unbelievable. You see a guy, you knew right away in town growing up as a kid, you see a guy's car who worked in the coke ovens. And it was blistered because of the acidic temperature of the molten steel. And you're just kind of like, man, this is it, and it was there. It was a steel mill, Army, and you get back from Vietnam at the time, and you try to make a life for yourself. Well, he figured out another way. He's like, hey, we got this great sport. So he started at a pretty young age. He's working in the mill, 18. He went to Maryland. He graduated from City College in 56, went to Maryland for a year. He got thrown out for fighting. And he went home and said, I'm going to do it this way, and started his job at the steel mill, and he was coaching junior league lacrosse. And initially it was really grassroots because no one knew what it was. And, Dundalk was a football town, your conventional sports. And he brought it to like the people in the area, and it took pretty quickly. But he had a hard time finding that like elite level athlete to play because they were already locked into baseball and football. Right. So he went to all the schools in the area in the city, because the city didn't have any lacrosse at the time. And he told the principals, I want your biggest problem kids. I want the kids you have a hard time with, disciplinary wise. And he brought them out, and he told him, he's like, he'd go pick them up, 8, 9 kids at a time in his little white Mercury station wagon, and bring them out to Dundalk, and they practice, and he'd take them home.
That's great.
He just kept doing it. And I was on the tail end of that. I was on the tail end of it, and it started to ebb in the, downward direction. People didn't agree with his technique, and, he's a pretty gruff guy. He's an old school kind of in your grill, grab your helmet, drag you off the field when you shot, faked high, shot high, got stuffed, boom, you got dragged off the field by your face mask. And, it was like, how to finish.
I'll tell you, Skip Evans was a legend. I'll tell a quick story, which is one of my favorite. David knows the story well. When David was a freshman and I came back and I was a senior, I think it was after, one of our first couple of games, and, we were at the reception, and, I came over and I introduced myself to Mr. Evans, and I was like, "Hey, Mr. Evans." He's like, "Skip." And I said, "Hey, Skip, good to meet you. Andy Towers." And he goes, "Towers, huh?" And I go, "Yep." And he goes, "Did your old man go to Princeton?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "I think I knocked him on his ass one time." So awesome. Yeah. So awesome. David, I'm going to impose one more request for you. And you told me this story at camp when we did Coach Benedict's summer camp about 28 years ago. And you told the story about why you speak so loudly. Can you give a little color on that and give a quick review on how that came about?
Let's hear that.
Yeah, well, so Skip, my father, he works in a hot strip mill, and he's a foreman. So he's constantly talking to guys, and you're supposed to wear like big earphones, helmet, hard gear, all that shit. And he is always taking his earphones off. So he basically just got to a point where he just left them off. He's like, unless he had extended time. Anyway, long story short, a hot strip mill is like, it's loud. It is loud. And he probably lost his hearing or partially lost his hearing at like 35, maybe 40. So, I'm one of 5 kids. We're sitting we had a big, Irish Catholic, dinner table, and it was like a feast every night. And, I always sit, down the right side. And "How was your day, Dad?" "What? I can't hear you. You got to speak up." And I'd be like, "How was your day?" Okay. And then we'd start the conversation, and you're like, and so I don't know, like, in order to be heard, you're one of 5 kids anyway, and then in order to be heard, you got to scream at the guy, and he's like, "It was okay. It was okay." And you'd look over his glasses, his bifocal glasses, and you'd just be like, "It was okay. Okay." That was it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I like it. Now, Andy, as you were growing up, lacrosse, on Long Island was big in upstate New York. It was huge in Maryland, not quite as big in Connecticut. And with guys like Eamon McEnany, Mike O'Neill, working with you guys, did you feel like you were kind of pioneers there in the state of Connecticut?
Yeah, no question. I think that, I was lucky to be part of a really talented and deep class in 1987. We had about, 10 or 12 guys out of that team go and play Division I lacrosse, which was significantly easier back then because there just weren't as many kids playing.
Still, that's impressive.
Yeah, it really was impressive. And so, but we were the first class to go through the youth program. And so we ended up pounding all of the teams around here. We'd play one tough game a year, which was usually Wilton. And so, our coach did a great job. Howard Benedict, Hall of Famer, Connecticut Hall of Famer. He did such an incredible job of aggressively scheduling the best teams that he could schedule in 86 and in 87. And so, among those programs that we played Chaminade. We played you guys our senior year, like Yorktown. We went up and played Longmeadow, which was the Massachusetts state champion. We played Westfield, which was the New Jersey state champion.
Right.
And he really, we played Fox Lane, who was one of the best teams in Westchester. Along with Yorktown, we played John Jay. But there was definitely a chip on our shoulder,
right,
feeling like we didn't get the respect that we felt as a really good team we deserved. And that was a chip that we certainly carried to the camps in the summer, but I think it was ultimately our game versus you guys in 87 that was, sort of the unofficial, number 1 versus number 2 teams in the country that really helped Connecticut lacrosse, get on the map. And since that happened, there's been a lot of Connecticut teams that have followed us that have, continued to schedule aggressively. And, if you're out there playing the best teams in the area, it's hard to say that you're not one of those best teams as long as you're winning your fair share. And we did.
Right. That's great. Well, I remember reading your Connecticut US Lax Hall of Fame information there, the content, and they were saying that you were one of the best lacrosse players, and that your name would always be synonymous with lacrosse in the state of Connecticut, and you kind of put Connecticut on the map. So how does something like that feel? That kind of an honor?
Well, I think that's a really nice thing to say. I mean, I think there were guys ahead of me between Boyd Harden, my brother, Pat Burke, who went and played at Maryland, Graham Harden. I mean, there was a lot of unbelievably good Connecticut lacrosse players that were before me in the 80s and the 70s. You know, I think it's really more reflective of the fact that we were out scheduling the best teams in the states around us that really put, you know, Connecticut lacrosse on the map. But I certainly appreciate you saying that.
Right. Good deal. Now, David, you played in a fiercely competitive high school league there in Baltimore. And tell our listeners what it was like playing in that high school league in the early 1990s.
I mean, it's the same way today. I look at these guys. I mean, it's kind of branched out a little bit. The guys go down to DC now and up to Philly. But I think at the end of the day, that Baltimore, and it was the MSA, not to be confused with the MI where I live now in Massachusetts. I got to make sure I'm very clear with that.
Oh yeah.
Because, you know, like every game was a tremendous tilt. And guys were like, who was your big rival? And, you know, naturally Calvert Hall is a big rival of Loyola. We had the Thanksgiving Day football game and those types of things, but we had St. Mary's, we had Severn, we had at the time, you know, like Boys Latin, and even Mount St. Joe. The Mount St. Joe had the Beach Brothers at the time, who were catalysts for a bunch of guys coming in there, and they made that team really tough. They stayed at home. A lot of times we would get Catonsville kids to come to Loyola, but those guys stayed home and kept a bunch of guys in Catonsville. And St. Joe was great. So, and then you had St. Paul's, which they were good. McDonough wasn't on the radar at the time. It was actually pretty funny because they're such a juggernaut now. But I think they're a product of one. Hilge's a great coach, great guy, yeah, and people just love to be around him. But I think a lot of it has been facilitated by kids coming into the region to play for a great high school in that league. Mm-hmm. So he has boarding, which is pretty unique for that league because all the other schools are day schools. Right. I drove 45, to your point. I live in Dundalk, Baltimore. Everybody's like, oh, hotbed, whatever. I had to drive almost an hour to school every day, one way, you know, which is, you know, it's pretty tough. But, you know, I also felt like Loyola was the school for me. It was, you know, Jesuit school, Catholic, all boys. It was big, very competitive. Every day was like just to be the alpha, you know, on the back court playing hoop, you know, in the weight room. It's like everything was a contest, and it just forces you to be a competitor at everything. So I think
good preparation.
You know, I take it from Andy. Andy always said it. It matters. Everything you're doing, you know, like the food line. You want to get there first. You want to be the best on the basketball court, even if you don't play hoop. Who cares? You want to compete. And I do think it's a big part of like what happens today with kids today. They show up, they check the box. It ain't about checking the box. It's about competing.
Right.
And I think like that's the beauty of that league, you know, to kind of go full circle. But that league, there's no easy games ever. Now you got like Paul VI in Virginia. You know, I'm on the Loyola alumni site, and Mark Dixon does a great job keeping us all posted on what's going on with the team. And every game is we got Georgetown Prep today at Paul VI. They lost. They just played Haverford 8-6. They lost. You know, it's like, you know, and now they're going to Philly and DC, which is just supplementing an already really tough schedule. So
that's great.
Yeah, it's funny, Dave, listening to Andy say about how Wilton had to schedule. You know, the schedule when you played in that league, I was lucky enough to play at St. Mary's. It was just like every single game. You know, twice a week was just tough competition. I think that's why for so long, so many guys from that league were so successful at the next level because they just knew how to compete. There was no days off. It was a fun league to play in.
I agree. If you kept your edge, you know, like I do think, like I've said this and I'll probably get crucified for it, but I do think that in Baltimore, it's been like such a byproduct of the league. You know, you reach like certain levels in that league and you're kind of like, I've arrived. And guys will be like that cliche high school hero, college zero. You know, we had tons of guys coming out of school and you're like, you know, very prominent figures going to Virginia and Carolina and these places. And you're kind of like, huh, you know, okay, I get it. And then you see them get there and they just kind of flounder a little bit. So really like, and now it's about keeping your edge and staying competitive and keeping it fresh for yourself. And I think that's their biggest challenge in such a, really dynamic league, is just making sure like you're ready for the next level.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
Even every practice has got to matter for you guys in that league. And I don't want to speak for Jay, but I think that in Connecticut we had about 5 tough games a year. We'd play 20 and we'd have 5 tough games. We'd play Wilton once or twice. We'd play them in the county championship, usually the state championship. But it was only until my senior year, junior year, where we were actually playing closer to like 8 really tough games. I'm sure Garden City, you guys would blow out, 85% of the teams that you played. And obviously you'd have your challenges that were annual between Manhasset and Ward Melville and that sort of stuff in the playoffs. But I can't imagine where every single team is kind of a pick 'em to some degree. The layer below that is every practice matters then, right? It's not like you can fuck around for 3 weeks because you got 3 to 6 shit teams on your schedule. When you have no shit teams on your schedule, you better bring it every single day. And that discipline, it just, creates I have to believe, a foundation of confidence and resiliency and unity that, you really can only obtain when you're going to battle with guys on a daily basis, right?
Absolutely.
So, Andy, that's a great segue into that high level of competition. I know you and my co-host Jaybird were lucky enough to play on the first ever junior national team for Team USA as midfielders. Can you tell us about what it was like, first of all, to be the part of that first team of junior national team players, and what it was like to compete against those guys day in and day out, and then in the World Championships? What were some of your takeaways and memories from that experience?
Yeah, it was incredibly humbling. David had just talked about a few minutes ago about how, you kind of reached a point playing in the MSA where, you kind of had arrived. And as a player in Connecticut, I knew probably 80% of the guys on that U19 team. I knew who they were long before they had any idea who I was. We were constantly looking for respect being in Connecticut. And, so I was following Jay's success. Before Jay, I was following Andy Krause's success. And I was following, what was going on, with a lot of the other guys on the team. And so to finally be able to play with and against those guys at the tryouts was something that was super humbling, but it also gave me a lot of confidence that I could play with those guys. And I think, that was the first part of tryouts. And then I remember getting the letter and making the team, and I was so happy about it and couldn't really believe it, but feeling like, I feel like I belong. I feel like I belong with the best players, in the country that were our age at the time. And it was an unbelievable experience, as much as it was excitement about the lacrosse piece. Probably after our, second scrimmage, the lacrosse actually became kind of secondary to just the nonstop tomfoolery that each of the individuals on the team brought to the environment.
What a crew.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Andrew, because I have known a few of you on that team, and it seemed like quite a collection of characters.
It was.
And as they say, colorful personalities. What were some of those, off the field experiences that are okay to share with our listeners, Andy? Please, a little discretion here, Andrew.
Yeah,
or just some of the personalities.
I'm not so sure that I can.
Right, just the personalities. You can
throw it out
relate some
there.
of that. Yeah, like who are some of the funnier guys? Let's run through.
Well, that's easy. I mean,
number one.
I think that Matt Panetta has to be at the top of the list.
Right.
As Billy Dwan would say about Matt Panetta, Panetta knows he's mint. He just doesn't know why he's mint. And what was true with Panetta at 19 is true with Panetta at 54. Exact same character. But you had so many funny people.
What about Jerry D? Remember him? Oh,
Jerry D, was just a nonstop. I can't even imagine Jerry D was in the world of social media. He would be getting 6-figure checks for having 30 million followers because he was just a nonstop reel of entertainment.
Do you remember this guy, Jerry DiLorenzo, was one of our goalies, and we took like maybe 10 to 12 flights on this trip. We went to Australia and we flew all over the place. We also went to Hawaii, which was amazing for like a 3-day just, fun trip after it. But do you remember what Jerry would do every time we would take off?
No.
He would, we'd be on these huge planes. We're flying to Australia. It's like a giant 747, or I don't know much about planes. I don't know if they could be bigger than that. But there's all these people on the plane. And Jerry DiLorenzo, all of a sudden, there'd be like a quiet as we're about to take off. And he would go, the whole plane would like be shaking. And then everyone would burst out into laughter. He did it like a dozen times. It never failed.
I do remember that now that you said that.
Oh, my God.
I originally thought it was Hallelujah, but yeah, I remember him doing that. But it was a great crew. We had unbelievable players. Pat McCabe, who probably is, one of two guys in the conversation for the best defenseman in the history of the sport. Between Jay and Elks and Mickey Cavodi and Craig Leader, all guys that played in the Garden City team. It was interesting because the team was kind of like accumulation of like the best players from about 5 teams. West Genesee had an unbelievable team that year.
Right, Shatner.
And Todd Ottomul and Shatner.
Right.
And was there another West Genny guy? I thought there was, maybe not. Blanding, I know, was on that team and went to Loyola, but Loyola had Garth and George Gliffis and Greninger.
Right. Danny Partridge. Danny
What's that?
Partridge. Remember, DiLorenzo called Greninger Danny Partridge. Get your drums and get back on the bus.
All right.
So perfect.
Hey,
So
Dave.
perfect.
Hey, Dave. How about if we stop the old home week here on the U.S. Under 19 team with these two guys? I mean, and maybe Jay, we can move on to a little bit of David's college career.
Right. So David, actually,
I got to play them. We played them in. We played them in Wilton, right? We played.
Yeah, Wilton.
Yeah, 92 team played the 88 team in Wilton, and to Andy's point, it's like we're all like on the field and we're walking around like watching kind of like everybody's mentor / like the guy you want to emulate. And it was like, holy cow, this is gonna be a dogfight. And then you get out there with the helmets on and there's a little bit of lumber laid and it's like, okay, now I remember. And they beat us too. And Andy was like, he's all fired up and he comes over and he hits me on the sideline. And honestly, to this point, I hadn't that's the first time I met Andy.
Nice.
And, like I'm obviously on my way to Brown that year. And I left the field and my father was like, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't think anybody's going to be able to touch us at Brown.
Nice. Right.
And I still, to this day, it rubs my ass that anybody do this. And that's probably why I have all these issues. And I'm talking to a lot of people about it, but whatever. I feel very competitive.
Well, that was bringing us to that next question. As you were coming to Brown in 92, after you were a very highly touted recruit, one of the top in the whole country, Dom had recruited you. Dom decides to go to UVA and take that job. And there you are. Pete Lasagna always tells the story of how Pete hopped in a car, drove from Rhode Island all the way down to Maryland to kind of talk you off the ledge, so to speak, and try to convince you to stay at Brown. Now, do you remember what that was like?
Yeah, like it was yesterday. I mean, it was a little bit surreal, but like 2 things like really stick out. One, like I did a PG year at Bridgeton after Loyola.
Okay.
And Dom, with his handwritten letters, you guys all know his handwritten letters, and he's like, this is a big year for you because, you could make this a reality. And, coming out of Loyola, I probably had a little too much fun. And, I was looking at a couple schools, Loyola and Maryland. Dickie Dell, he's like related to me like a second cousin or something. He's like, I don't know if you could play Division I lacrosse. And I was just kind of laughing at him like, all right, dude. So like your number 1 defenseman I beat every day in practice at will. I'm like, so, all right. But, like I played like top 205 had just come out.
Right.
And it was 205 guys year 1. Year 2 was like 300.
And they called it 205 though, right?
Yep.
They had 400
I was
guys
there year 2 and year 3. And that's where Dom first saw me play, like just saw me play, like unadulterated. Tommy McClellan was my coach from Loyola College, goalie, great dude. We lost our number 1, Garden City boy, Pat Marvin, blows out his knee during skills at top 205. So we lose our number 1 pick at the midfield. And, he's like, what do we do? And I was like, all right, I'll play midfield. So I go up and I'm facing off and I'm, running down the field and throwing darts at the cage. And I'm just having a good time. I was like, just playing. And I was like, fuck all the haters, dude. You know, I was so tired of people telling me what I could do.
Yeah.
Right.
And I could do anything on the lacrosse field. It's the one place I could just do whatever I wanted and be myself. And not to like, you know, over cliche that whole thing, but I just had a good time. And there's guys
Well,
like
guy, I would just throw out too for your listeners. It's huge. You know, you having belief in yourself and you having the attitude. It doesn't matter what other people think. It matters what I think. Right?
yeah, I mean, it
matters,
really does.
It
And
matters what I know I can do.
a
And you go out there
frustrating
and you
part for
do it.
me in high school was I like guys like really didn't know who I was because we played a 2-2-2. And I was the only guy that could catch and finish with both hands. So our coach put me on the crease, no problem, but you're only as good as the guy throwing you the ball. And
Right.
if guys don't see you, you flash for the ball, you know, it can be really frustrating. So, you know, it's like, all right, well, can you dodge? Can you do this? Yeah. Like, let's go. Serve
Right.
it up.
You prove
And-
that eventually.
Right. So I got to 205 and I was like, I'm going to play midfield because we got, you know, we don't have a midi. You
That's
can come
crazy.
down the field, whatever. So I did that. They saw that. And I think they like were intrigued by that. And I also think
Right.
like you guys probably know this better than anybody, but like Dom, I feel like made his like living on that guy who was like, all right, like that guy's going to Virginia, that guy's going to Carolina. The third guy on that line is the guy I want. And that's kind of who I was. Like, you know, you got Greg Langhoff going to Carolina, you got Sean Radeball going to Maryland.
Hmm.
I was the third guy on that line. And
Right.
he kind of targeted me. And then I show up and I just running up and down the field. And he just kept with it, man. I'll give you a
So, and you were probably all in with Dom because he was a great recruiter. He would get a great connection with the people he was recruiting.
I mean,
And
I
then you
was
get right.
I
So you get
wasn't-
the news that he's not going to be there, and Pete
I wasn't
Lasagna.
naive, dude. I was a long shot, man. Like for me,
Yeah.
it was like I'm like,
But
wait,
what did you think? Did you think, well, maybe I won't go to Brown? Maybe I'll follow Dom at Virginia, maybe? Or like, what were your thoughts at that point? And again, just to be clear to everybody, Pete Lasagna was a coach of the year at Brown. He had not, I don't think he had been a head coach, though, at this point. He was a longtime assistant, very good coach there.
no, I was his
Coached
last.
me for 4 years, very good coach. But still, you know, for David, he may
Dom.
not have known him as well.
I was Dom's last recruiting class coming in.
Right.
And of course, he recruits like 7 attackmen because Darren's leaving, and you know, which you know was okay, cool, and you got to hedge your bets, I guess, and so he leaves that summer and he calls me. He's like, I'm going to Virginia and we're going back and forth. Dude, I remember this day. I'm in the basement on the old house phone. Phone rings, I pick it up. Like, hello.
The curly cord on that.
You hear, I was like, right away, I knew that voice. It's like, hey, David, it's Dom. And I'm like, what's up, man? I heard some weird news. You're going to Virginia, you know? And he's like, tell me that's a rumor. And he's like,
Right.
no, it's real. That's why I'm calling. Then he's like, all right, what do you think? Do you want to come down here? And I was like, no
Wow.
fucking way. Like, I know every single guy at Virginia. And that's like little Baltimore. And I'm trying to get away from that shit. Like, remember,
Right.
like in Baltimore, I'm the Dundalk kid,
Right.
which isn't
Right.
exactly like good rap.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm out of here. And I told him, I was like, I'll see you on the field. You know, and we'll play it. And, you know, you're gonna lose. And he was like, total deadpan, man. I was like, was more motivated to beat that team. You know, it's big part of it, guys. You don't even know this, but you know, you guys, I come to Loyola College after the Hop game. I'm at Hopkins, and you guys just knocked off Loyola, and I stroll
yeah.
onto the field to the Brown guys all diving in a pile. And I look at my father, who was at Loyola College at the time, and he was like, Brown just beat us. And I was like, fuck yeah, haha. See you, dude.
91, huh?
Yep. And,
Right.
and then, you know, you're like, wait, this school's real. And it's not just like some random place up in Rhode Island. And, you know, so
Right. That was big for us. Loyola was
Yeah,
number
had-
2,
you had
undefeated.
the winner in that game, Jay.
Oh.
You scored the winning goal in that game. They were up like 12-8 or something.
Jay put us on his back.
We got it back to 12-12. And Jay, I don't know how it happened. Maybe it was off a face-off. Maybe it was off a save, but you got the ball. And I remember you telling me after the game, you're like, yeah, I had the ball and I was running and I'm like, nobody's picking me up. And here I go and I'm getting so close and nobody's picking me up. And I'm just going to shoot it and bang, we won. But that's how you described it to me in the locker room. I'll never forget that.
I remember I was looking. It was off a clear. I think I started on the attack zone, though, and I had to run back. And Harvey threw me the ball. And I turned, and everyone's looking like, like someone was supposed to be where I was, and they weren't for Loyola. And I heard Cottle.
Go figure. Loyola on this assignment.
Cottle let him know about it in the locker room. But I'm running along. I'm like, where's the guy? Like someone should be coming. And I'm looking and I'm pretending like I'm going to pass it to someone. And everyone's like in the four corners of the field. And all of a sudden everyone is running at me at the same time. And I'm like, no, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. And that last second, I'm like, a little further back. And I got there. I got hammered, but I got there.
Yes.
That was crazy.
Man.
Well, thanks for remembering that. Good stuff.
Yeah, so that was like...
So what did Pete say? Did you say, hey, Pete, you know what? You didn't need to drive down here because I just talked to Dom and forget it. But I'm glad you did. Thanks for the visit.
Yeah, honestly, like I couldn't have been more excited to go to Brown at the time. It was, for me, it was
awesome.
no brainer that the work was done. You know, like I picked them over Hopkins, which is like, you know, as you can imagine, like growing up as a kid, Bob Scott's like one of my family friends. And
right. I did the same. I almost went to Hopkins. I came very close, and I just had such a connection with Dom and Brown.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So, Dave, changing gears a little bit, you know, you and Andy both had successful professional careers after college, you know, 6-time All-Star in the MLL, as we talked about. And, you know, Andy's now engaged in the next evolution of the program at the PLL. But let's go back old school. What was it like playing in the MLL back in your day? What was that part of your lacrosse journey like?
To hear the answer to that intriguing question, please tune in next week as we continue with our series. And until we meet again, here's to hoping you find the twine. We're signing off here at the Get the Lax Scoop. Thanks again so much. We will see you the next time.